And shakers. With the new year ahead, investor sentiment in Indonesia, especially for the startup industry, continues to remain cautious amid global economic challenges and a potential recession. Metro Globe Network's Audrey Widodo spoke with the chairman of the Association of Indonesian Venture Capital and Startups, Eddi Danusaputro, to gain insight on Indonesia's current investment climate and the outlook for 2023.
So my first question for you is, how do the macroeconomic conditions such as GDP growth and inflation have impacted investing sentiment in Indonesia? And also what the outlook is for 2023.
Okay, so if you break down who invests in the startup landscape or ecosystem in Indonesia, it's a mix of domestic investors and foreign investors, whether these are angel investors, these are corporations, venture capitals, private equity, and so forth. The reality is that both domestic and foreign investors are sensitive to interest rate hikes. Why? Because their cost of capital becomes more expensive, especially those who rely on limited partners or a source of funds that are not internal. And obviously, then the opportunity cost of capital also increases. Like as interest rates go up, you can put your money, investors can put their money in the bank and gain X%. So if they were to take that money out of the bank and invest it, whether in startups or other investments, they would expect a higher return on investment as if they were just to put their money in safer, so to speak, investments. So the increase in interest rates increases cost of capital, increases expectations on return also. The end result is that investors have become and will continue to be selective. So it's not like we've stopped investing, we continue to invest, but we are now more selective. So I do see that 2023 would be a year where investors still invest, but more selectively in terms of stages, sectors, and obviously the individual startups themselves.
So with that, how do you think, for example, for foreign investors, they perceive the level of risk in Indonesia for the market this year?
Hopefully, we've passed the pandemic stage. We're now into an endemic, recovering in that sense. But there is a slowdown in macroeconomic factors, which affects, as we can see, interest rates have gone up, as you can see, fuel prices have gone up, food prices have gone up, logistic prices, costs have gone up. And you can see that impact in the real economy, not only the startups, but traditional economy companies have also conducted layoffs, right? So all of these macroeconomic factors have impacted in a reduce in the top line, the revenue. The revenue has been impacted. So startups in the past, where they experience, I guess, exponential growth, quarter to quarter, year by year, that's no longer the case. So growth has plateaued, has flattened out. It's still growing, but not at the rate that it was before, right? But so because the top line has slowed down, slowing down, this means that it's in an increase, have more effort to conduct fundraising activities, because investors, normally we look at top line. We understand that bottom line profit comes later. But if the top line is slowing down, then we have to be more selective in terms of which ones will weather the storm.
So as you said, many investors are becoming more selective. Have you seen any trends or patterns in investing sentiment that you think are worth noting?
Yeah, so some sectors will be considered more, I guess, safe, so to speak. For example, fintech is people still need financial services, whether it's lending, payments, and so forth. So that's considered a safer investment. Some like Agri is the same. Maybe people still need food, food supply, and so forth. Some I think are less interesting for investors at this moment. For example, e-commerce marketplaces, with discretionary income going down, spending also going down because people are facing tightening measures on their everyday household. People not spending as much, they're not shopping as much. So marketplaces will see a reduction in top line metrics. So logistics will feel the impact also. So there are certain sectors that we feel will be able to be stronger positioned to weather the storm. Some, will be a little bit more volatile. And then maybe in terms of stages, seed stage, although more attractive in terms of risk return, but also more risky in terms of, we might not survive, right? Because it's still very early stage. So maybe now investors prefer more on the growth stage because, the higher probability of survival.
So since this is the beginning of 2023, how do you expect the investing sentiment to evolve over the next 6 to 12 months?
Okay, honestly speaking, as an investor, we've been waiting for some. I mean, this is tricky. I don't want to sound unsympathetic, yeah, but we've been waiting for some valuation corrections. And it's similar to if you were to invest in the stock market. What we're waiting for most of the time when there's a correction or a slowdown in the economy is the blue chips to come down in prices, right? That's a correction, and that's when we start buying. Oh, blue chips are down, Oh, let's buy blue chips because they're down, right? It's a good valuation to come in, right? So that's what we're waiting for. Also, in terms of the startup scene, good startups that maybe because of the economic macro sentiment and because of the difficulty to fundraise, investors being more selective and so forth, their valuations are not as high or not as expensive compared to the past 3 years or 4 years or whatever, right? So we feel that, this valuation makes more sense now. So we're waiting for that. We're waiting for this so-called valuation correction. The term that we use in our industry is a down round, but it may come to that, it may not, case by case. But if a valuation becomes more attractive, more reasonable, then that's the time to go in.
The Asia Pacific shares have just been going into a bear market. Do you have any opinions on that or your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's all linked, right? Because investors are, there's no borders now in terms of investing. So I think whatever happens in the region, will we get impacted? Yes. As I said in the beginning, Indonesia also has a lot of foreign investments, not only into the stock markets, but also into the startup markets. So yes, and the reality is that at the growth and the late stage. At the growth and late stages, we rely heavily on foreign investments. VCs coming out of Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Silicon Valley for that matter, very active in the Indonesian market. So hopefully this will rebound and people will actually see it as a buying opportunity. The best time to buy is when actually the valuations are lower, right? Not when it's at the peak. Now, I must remind everybody that startup investing is for the long haul. It's a long-term investment. We're not talking 5 days or 5 months. We're talking maybe 5 years, right? This is what differentiates us versus stock market investing, for example. Why? Because you invest in a startup, you're going to be there for 3 to 5 years, and hopefully you exit at the IPO or M&A or whatever, right? But it's not a short-term investment. So we as investors, we have to have a long-term horizon.
And my last question for you is just what are your sentiments for the next upcoming months in Indonesia in terms of, higher interest rates potentially, and how does that affect the market performance?
I think we have to compare Indonesia versus other countries, our neighbors, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, and so forth. I think we're in a good position. I think if you are an investor, you are a foreign investor wanting to invest in this part of the world, I think Indonesia is a good bet. We haven't gone into recession. I think inflation is higher than before, but still manageable. Employment rate also, and a lot of the macroeconomic factors, although not ideal 100%, but I think it's manageable. And we're coming out of the pandemic. People are traveling, so I think we're in a better position, relatively speaking, compared to some of our neighbors. So if I were a betting man and I were an investor, which I am, I'm very bullish on Indonesia.